interesting he pointed out in here. And when you just lean back in your chair and think about it, you're like, damn, he's right. And that is the idea that this CBA offer from the owners virtually did not change in the last 7 months. Kind of interesting.
Talk about the WNBA because there is a yarn that is being thread that is so wrong. The players have come out talking about, we did it. This was all about business, and we mean business.
That's not celebration you're hearing in his voice. That's the sound of someone watching a masterclass in negotiation go completely unrecognized. David Sampson, former Miami Marlins executive who's been inside these exact rooms during CBA talks, just called out what nobody in WNBA media wants to admit. The players didn't win this negotiation, they got worked. And the victory laps happening across social media right now, that's exactly what ownership wanted to see.
It's a tiny smidge better, but not even close to where the WNBA owners were willing to go. The revenue sharing number stayed well below the 20 range. The salary cap growing to 10 million over
was way below where they were willing to go. Adam Silver and the league worked these players.
7 years? Oh my God. An opt-out after 6 years only? The minimum salary? Hey, 300 grand. Way to go. I'm happy there's an agreement, don't get me wrong. But there's nothing I like better than a victory lap done by someone who just got their ass kicked.
7 months. That's how long these negotiations supposedly lasted. The WNBA Players Association started by demanding 40% revenue share back in September 2024. By December, they dropped to 30%, and when the deal finally closed in January 2025, they landed somewhere the league describes as approaching 20%. Approaching, not at 20, not above 20, approaching, which means there's still a 1 in front of that number. Here's what makes Sampson's analysis devastating. He's pointing out that the offer the players accepted in January looks almost identical to what ownership put on the table 7 months earlier. The salary cap increase? Already baked in. The minimum salary bump to $300,000? That was always coming. The 6-year opt-out? Ownership's preferred timeline from day one.
The details of the CBA. The WNBA players, they did get something. They got a raise. Boy, that's some kind of transformational. Do I think that having a $10 million salary cap range at the end of a 7-year deal where the players only get an opt-out after year 6, do I think that that is some sort of thing to celebrate for players? I think what you celebrate is that, in theory, if you're making 300 grand, which is around the minimum, you don't need to go play in Russia. I don't think this does anything to put Unrivaled out of business. I don't think this does anything to put any potential competitor of the WNBA out of business.
Listen to what he's saying about those talking points. Breanna Stewart called this deal transformational. Nneka Ogwumike, the WNBPA president, said it would change the lives of so many players. And Sampson's response, management is thrilled when employees use those exact phrases, because it means they're selling the deal for you. The salary cap will reach $10 million per team by year 7 of this agreement. That's 2032. For context, the NBA salary cap in 2025 is $140 million per team. Even accounting for revenue differences, that $10 million figure represents a fraction of what the players could have extracted if they'd held firm. The minimum salary hitting $300,000 means players won't need to play overseas in Russia anymore. That's real. That matters for quality of life. But it's not the transformational shift the rhetoric suggests.
The reason why the players did not get the victory that they sought, though it is the victory they were able to tell you they sought, is that Adam Silver and the WNBA owners never had a reason to move to the player demands, and the players knew it.
Ooh-wee. That, by the way, that Nothing Personal with David Sampson, that's a hell of a show. Like, it's live during the week in the morning times, and I love any kind of show that has to do with the business of sports, and he's really good at it.
Now we're getting to the tactical breakdown. Sampson's making a point here that anyone who follows labor negotiations understands immediately. Adam Silver and the WNBA ownership group never had a reason to move toward the players' demands, and the players knew it. Think about the leverage situation. The WNBA season runs May through October. Training camps start in April. This deal got done in January 2025, with camps opening in 3 months. The players could threaten to miss training camp, maybe even regular season games. But here's the problem. The league was prepared for that. Sampson's saying it explicitly. Ownership had already modeled out losing all of training camp if necessary. They'd built that into their contingency planning. Meanwhile, what leverage did the players have? The threat of a work stoppage in a league that, until very recently, was losing money every single year. The threat of sitting out in a league where the average career length is under 4 years. The threat of walking away from the first moment in WNBA history where mainstream attention was actually materializing into real revenue growth.
But that's hilarious because all you're seeing across social media is the victory laps from all these players moonwalking across social media. David Sampson's telling you, no, that was foot to ass. They got their ass kicked in negotiations. That hardly anything changed over a 7-month period. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. And I had heard the other day, right before this went down, like 5 days ago, that, the owners actually had built it into their model behind the scenes that they could go way up and still turn a profit. And
the opt-out structure tells you everything about who controlled this negotiation. The players wanted flexibility. They wanted the ability to revisit terms quickly as the league's financial picture improved. A 3-year opt-out would have made sense. It would have let them renegotiate in 2028, right when the new media rights deals fully kick in, right when expansion team fees from Golden State and Toronto get distributed, right when we'll actually know if this Caitlin Clark-driven rating surge is sustainable. Instead, they're locked in for 6 years. 6 years before they can even attempt to reopen negotiations. That's 2031 before the opt-out window. By that point, we'll have seen 2 full Olympic cycles, multiple expansion teams, potentially new media deals, and a completely different revenue landscape. And the players will still be operating under revenue share terms that were set based on 2024 financials. Sampson's laughing because this is negotiation 101. When you're the side with leverage, you lock the other side in for as long as possible. When you're the side without leverage, you take the short deal and bet on yourself to do better next time. The players took the long deal. That tells you who had the leverage.
Just hadn't told anybody. I mean, they wasn't going to let on. And it worked. That they got this deal done for, as the media keeps saying, near 20%. Again, why hasn't this figure actually come out? I contend they don't want it out because it's still got a 1 in front of it. Remember, they started out at 40%, and then went to 30%, and then somehow this has still got any kind of a 1 in front of it. They don't want that out there. And again, I said, hey, opt out after 3 years. Go back to the table. Nah. Adam Silver reeled their asses in for 6 years, locked in, before they can even attempt to get out of this.
Here's what Sampson heard that made him certain the players got outmaneuvered. About 5 days before the deal was announced, word started circulating in sports business circles that the owners had built significantly more room into their financial models than they were letting on. They could have gone higher on revenue share and still turned a profit. They just didn't tell anyone. This is standard negotiation tactics, but it's particularly effective when the other side doesn't have the stomach for a prolonged fight. The WNBA owners knew the players were under pressure to get a deal done. They knew the media narrative around the league's growth was creating expectations. They knew players like Stewart and Ogwumike needed to deliver something they could call a win. So they waited. They held their position, and eventually the players came to them. The bonus structure for 2025 tells you something else important. The league is finally profitable. After 28 years of losses subsidized by the NBA, the WNBA made money in 2024. That's huge. That's the validation the league has needed for decades. But it also means the owners were negotiating from a position of strength, not desperation. They had momentum. They had proof of concept. They didn't need to give away the store.
That's funny. Now, I will say this. That also tells you, we talked about that revenue share and they got bonuses for 2025. That tells you most likely this league finally did make a profit. And something in the monetary trends and metrics for the NBA owners and WNBA owners have told them, we're about to make some real money. We're about to make some real money. Otherwise, this league, they would have said to hell with it and walked away from it. Tell me what you think. Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Watch the language Sampson uses here. They got their ass kicked. That's not analysis. That's a verdict. And it's coming from someone who's been on the ownership side of these negotiations, who understands exactly how the game is played, who can read between the lines of press releases and player statements. The victory lap phenomenon he's describing is real. Scroll through social media in the days after this deal was announced. Players posting celebration emojis. Media members praising the WNBPA's negotiating prowess. Think pieces about how this represents a turning point for women's sports labor relations, and all of it ignoring the fundamental reality that the deal the players signed is almost identical to what ownership offered 7 months ago. This isn't to say the players got nothing. The minimum salary increase is significant. The overall salary cap growth trajectory is real. The improved travel conditions, the enhanced marketing rights, the maternity benefits, all of that matters. But when you're evaluating a negotiation, you don't grade on effort or compare to past deals. You grade on whether you extracted maximum value given the leverage situation, and by that standard, this was a decisive win for ownership.
No punches. He's been involved with these CBA negotiations before. He knows what goes on behind the scenes, and you can tell from the way he talks, he knew what was going on. He's known what's going on forever. There is something very interesting.
Let's zoom out and look at what this means for the WNBA's trajectory over the next 6 years. Because that's the real story here. Not whether the players got a good deal or a bad deal, but what this CBA structure reveals about where the league is actually headed. First, the revenue share percentage. The fact that it's still in the teens, let's call it 18 or 19%, since the league won't release the exact number, tells you ownership believes significant infrastructure investment is still necessary. They're not ready to split revenue 50-50 like the NBA does because they're still building the foundation. New arenas, new practice facilities, expanded front office staff, enhanced production capabilities for broadcasts. All of that costs money that comes out of league revenue before players see their share. Second, the 6-year timeline with no opt-out until year 6 signals that ownership expects the current growth trajectory to level off. If they believed the Caitlin Clark effect was going to triple revenue every year, they would have been more willing to give players an earlier opt-out. Instead, they're betting that growth will be steady but not exponential, and they want cost certainty during that stabilization period. Third, the salary cap structure reaching $10 million by 2032 suggests the league is modeling revenue growth of roughly 12 to 15% annually. That's healthy growth, but it's not the explosive trajectory that would justify the transformational language players are using. It's the growth rate of a maturing business, not a disruptive upstart. Fourth, and this is crucial, this deal does nothing to threaten alternative leagues like Unrivaled. Sampson mentioned this specifically. If WNBA salaries were truly reaching the point where players didn't need supplemental income, Unrivaled wouldn't have been able to recruit top talent to play 3-on-3 basketball in Miami for 6 weeks. But they did recruit that talent, and they'll continue to, because even with the new CBA, most WNBA players are still looking for additional revenue streams. The Russia factor is real though. The minimum salary hitting $300,000 means players ranked 7th through 12th on rosters won't need to spend their winters in Yekaterinburg anymore. That's a genuine quality of life improvement and a safety issue given geopolitical tensions. But for stars making the max, they're still going to explore every opportunity to maximize earnings, whether that's Unrivaled, Ice Cube's Big Three, international leagues, or whatever comes next. Now let's talk about what Sampson's not saying but is clearly implying. The WNBPA's negotiating position was fundamentally weak because the union doesn't have the same nuclear option that major men's sports unions have. In the NBA, NFL, or MLB, A work stoppage cost owners billions in immediate revenue. Games don't happen, television contracts don't get fulfilled, sponsors don't get their activation opportunities. The pain is immediate and severe. In the WNBA, a work stoppage in 2025 would have been painful for players but manageable for owners. The league was profitable for the first time in 2024, but that profit was modest. Ownership could have absorbed a lost season, restructured, and come back in 2026 with replacement players if necessary. Would it have been ugly? Absolutely. Would it have damaged the brand? Definitely. But would it have been existentially threatening to ownership? Probably not. The players knew this, the union leadership knew this, and so when push came to shove, they took the deal on the table rather than risk everything on a work stoppage that might not generate the leverage they needed. Here's the part that's going to be controversial but needs to be said. The media coverage of this CBA negotiation was almost uniformly positive toward the players, framing their position as righteous and ownership's position as greedy. But that framing ignores basic economic reality. The WNBA lost money for 28 consecutive years. The NBA subsidized those losses to the tune of tens of millions annually. Ownership could have folded the league a dozen times over and been financially justified in doing so. They didn't. They kept investing, kept building, kept believing that eventually the market would materialize. And now that the market is finally materializing, now that the league is finally profitable, players are arguing they deserve 50% revenue share immediately. That's not how business works. Investors who absorbed decades of losses don't suddenly split profits 50-50 with labor the moment the enterprise turns profitable. They recoup their investment first. They build a cushion for future downturns. They reinvest in growth. And then, eventually, once the business is truly stable and mature, they move toward more equitable revenue sharing. The NBA's 50-50 split didn't happen overnight. It evolved over decades as the league's financial position strengthened. The WNBA is nowhere near that position yet. 1 year of profitability doesn't erase 28 years of losses. And ownership's willingness to lock in a revenue share percentage in the teens reflects their assessment that the league still needs significant retained earnings to fund continued growth. So when David Sampson says the players got worked, he's not being cruel or dismissive, he's being accurate. The players went into these negotiations with ambitious demands, public pressure on their side, and a media environment that was largely sympathetic to their position. And they came out with a deal that's marginally better than what ownership offered at the start, locked in for 6 years, with revenue share terms that keep them well below what they were demanding. That's not a negotiating victory, that's accepting reality. And the sooner the players and their supporters acknowledge that reality, the better position they'll be for the next negotiation in 2031. The question now becomes whether this deal will hold. 6 years is a long time in modern sports. If the WNBA's growth continues, if expansion to 16 teams happens, if international markets open up, if media rights deals explode in value, players are going to look at this CBA in year 4 or 5 and realize they left massive money on the table. And unlike previous generations of WNBA players who didn't have alternatives, this generation has options. Unrivaled isn't going away. International leagues are getting stronger. Content creation and personal branding offer revenue streams that didn't exist a decade ago. The owners bet that 6 years of cost certainty is worth more than the risk of player unrest down the line. The players bet that taking a modest win now is better than risking everything on a work stoppage that might not succeed. Both sides made calculated decisions based on their leveraged positions. But only one side got what they actually wanted. And it wasn't the players. So yeah, take your victory laps on social media, post your celebration threads, tell everyone this is transformational. But when you're sitting in that negotiating room in 2031, looking at revenue numbers that are multiples of what they are today, locked into a revenue share structure you agreed to in 2025, remember this moment. Remember that David Sampson tried to tell you. Remember that the deal you're celebrating today is the deal ownership wanted all along. And remember that in negotiations, the side that's happier when it's over is usually the side that won.